I've been thinking a lot about websites as it relates to AI. And the interesting twist on where AI is going is that AI is going to know more about us than maybe even we're willing to admit to ourselves at some point. And this vast repository of information should yield a better buying process, more personalization, more fitting specific products to our specific needs in an ideal world. Now, that's the utopian view of where AI is headed with websites. The reality of where we're at today is that people want to shortchange the process to get accelerated growth, where I haven't necessarily seen this playing out in a very positive way. I look at so many people that don't want to pay for web development, don't want to invest in their own brand messaging or positioning, and so AI is just going to do it for them. I've seen lots of AI consultants promise this, which is why pay someone to spend 3 months and X amount of dollars to build your website. AI can do it for you tomorrow. Show me one. I'd love to see it. I'd love to see one of these where the website clearly articulates your positioning, accelerates or facilitates a cleaner, better sales process, helps people decide what that buyer's journey is intended to be and nurtures them along in that process. And one of the fundamental parts of that is that positioning conversation. We've built this product, we've built this service for this very specific group of people, this very narrow problem. And those people are willing to pay more for our product because we know it removes the risk from the equation, because we know you've solved this problem for other people in our exact same way. This is your chance to take some of the practical things that we do in a lean marketing framework, right? Help organizations clearly identify what they need to say to a very narrow group of people so that they get it, they want it, they tell other people about it. And we're going to translate that conversation today into what should you do with your website in the age of AI, what works today and what doesn't work. So let's just start there, because I've had a lot of good conversations with either software development companies, AI consultants that sit on either sort of end of this spectrum. And there's a lot of great things that AI can do. A lot of the analysis tasks that we used to do before, where a manual process was initiated and developers and designers and all this team would get together and manually audit a website and do this really in-depth process. We used to charge anywhere from $5,000 to $15,000 for that process. And it really depended on what problem the organization was trying to solve. How in depth did we need to go into coding and compatibility versus a brand feel versus a site infrastructure and server setup? Like all of these different nuances in what a website actually did. Smaller organizations didn't have as much risk around it. You put it on standard hosting, you built your website, and if it was reasonably fast, it was fine. Bigger organizations that wanted to squeeze out all the performance gains out of that for competitive advantage cared a lot more about stuff like this. And so now what happens is AI can actually do sort of that 80% solution, usually, of things, especially around what to say, an SEO audit, maybe look at things like, do you have all the checkboxes set for SEO visibility, or are you missing coding compatibility, that kind of stuff. And usually that's good enough now. We do very little website audits outside of enterprise these days because they tend to focus more around, there's a caveat there and I'll get to that in a second. They tend to focus more around things like legal compliance for ADA audits or cookie compliance, things like GDPR or CCPA, California Consumer Protection Act, something where there's a legal reason that you have to do these things. And the one thing that sits outside of this is everybody's willing right now to pay for AI. Am I showing up in AI? And a lot of that is just smoke and mirrors. Pardon this sort of cynical view of that. People are just taking the same things they were doing for SEO and just copying and pasting and calling them AI now with no actual metrics on whether this shows up or not. And once again, I have a very cynical view of this because none of the tools exhibit the rigorous discipline that I would expect something like this to kick out. They're looking at search queries that I can't validate, or you have tools like SEMrush or whatever other tool. And once again, I think that SEMrush is probably the best tool in the industry, and we pay a fortune for them for all of our clients in using that tool. But when I go through and search for what brand mentions are there from an AI visibility audit and can't find them at all, it doesn't give me any confidence there to look at things like search volume around specific queries to say, is this worth focusing on in the first place? And so there are a few pieces to this that I think are really important. We'll probably end up writing a blog entry on this soon, on what are the core website metrics that we want to track for something like AI visibility and AI optimization. And so if you have a North Star metric, you have specific things that you're pointing to from AI, yes, by all means, go do those tactics, because you can own that data set and say, yes, I'm growing in this area or I'm not. But if all I get is a very small, unattributable, or there's a very small percentage, maybe 5-10% that have a referral traffic coming into your analytics data of this came from ChatGPT or Gemini or whatever LLM that was, right? But the large majority of that is unattributed and counts as direct traffic. What we're seeing is a huge user behavioral shift in how people navigate the internet, where we're losing attribution on what AI is doing to our traffic. And so things like our website and things like customer journey model, or customer journey model that we do in the lean marketing framework, and there's lots of other disciplines that do similar things, that model actually becomes 10x more important, because you actually have to create experimentation structure and say, if I'm doing these tactics, does it impact more growth for me? I have to be more rigorous and more disciplined about testing methodology and measuring outcomes, because the hardline attribution is going away. So let's take a step back and look at what should our websites be doing for us. A website today, it should be helping you sell at its core. It should be identifying who my core customer is and creating content where that core customer can find themselves in my website. And so as an expert, as someone that's trying to solve a problem for the market, I should be able to point and go, hey, you should feel this pain point. Does that hurt? Does this hurt? And when that audience finds them, when that person finds themselves and go, yeah, that's me, that's me, that's me, that's me, that initiates that sales conversation. This is the flaw of how I've seen most agencies or most organizations approach even SEO, not just AEO, GEO, AI SEO, whatever we're going to call it, is what they're doing is they're drafting their strategy, they're drafting their tactics for algorithms, for machine. They're not doing them for people. And the algorithms, the programs themselves, are written to approximate what would a person find valuable. And so what I would just challenge organizations on, optimize for humans, the machines will catch up. We've gotten so cheeky with our content. We use such flowery marketing language that nobody knows what we're talking about. We're saying things like, hey, we're going to be better every day. We work to be best in class. And so nobody knows exactly. Everybody goes, yeah, well, great. That could apply to a manufacturer. That could apply to a service company. That could apply to an ice cream shop, right? What we really need to do is to clearly spell out our vertical positioning and our horizontal positioning, our positioning pitch. We do this for this narrow set of people. We're a digital marketing agency that focuses on B2B, considered purchase sales. And you may even want to get more narrower than that, right? We do work on this for higher education or manufacturing, or we solve this problem for real estate. And so what we're looking in this positioning pitch is to clearly identify, not just for the human, but for the machines, to go, this is who we actually drive extraordinary value for. And so as you're looking at this, like when this often starts with strategy, you have to make a courageous decision to go, here's what I'm going after. And AI doesn't do that for you. AI doesn't create that positioning pitch for you. That's a courageous step that you have to do. And so what I would look at is you're looking for just, how do I grow sales? How do I reflect what I'm looking for in the market? The answer isn't just pretty, and it isn't even just functional. What I've seen a lot of people doing is, if you're not familiar with this term, but they're vibe coding their web environment, and at some point AI will connect to, and it does now to some degree. You have tools like Webflow. You have different tools that are connecting to this sort of website creation process. And what I see is it's mediocre at best. It doesn't create any sort of brand weight. You look like everybody else. And then you're not creating a meaningful conversation where your audience finds their problem, them emotionally in what solution you're trying to provide. and you're not giving the clear why on your messaging. Why choose us? And you can look at this in two different ways. Why choose us relative to the competitive set? And we're often scared to have that conversation. And so we're just leaving that as open fodder for ChatGPT to figure out on its own. Why choose us versus this other competitor? Well, we don't want to call out how we stand up to that other competitor and what we've built that's different than them. And so then ChatGPT just makes something up. And we're blind to that conversation because we don't see those chats, or we ask in a very narrow format that's personalized to our own chat history, and we don't know what it cranks out. And you can even ask ChatGPT, why did you pick that? And it just makes up an answer. Well, this is the designer's choice. If you care about design aesthetics, do this one. And if you care about functionality, pick that one. What's the difference? And so there you have to get to very technical meat, or you actually have to build your own tables and say, here's how we're categorizing this. Here's how we're building the space. Here's how we've positioned ourselves in that competitive space to do something meaningful. The competitor that most people don't think about, that you should be thinking about first and foremost, is not another company. Let me just say it again. Your biggest competitor is not a competitor that you thought about. Your biggest competitor is your ideal target audience making no decision at all. Your biggest competitor is no decision because there's so much information, because they don't trust that information, because they're trying to evaluate everything and they have limited resources. The more complex buying behaviors, the more complex problems to solve, that person just does nothing. They sit there and don't make any decision at all. And so Donald Miller has a very great phrase for this, right? You confuse, you lose is how he talks about this on his podcast. But I love that analysis. I love that idea of how do I create very clear messaging and a clear buying path where someone can understand that we know how to solve this problem, we can solve this problem for you. And that is what your website should be doing. Clear content. The audience identifies themselves in that content. The solution to that content is proven, right? And then there's very clear calls to action on what they should be doing next. And there's some things that you can look at depending on the type of industry that you're in, right? Sometimes that's to tee up a conversation with an expert that's going to help you solve this problem. If you don't know what the decision is, there's enough nuance. We're going to offer it. We're going to put an expert in front of you that'll help you just solve this. And what ChatGPT has done, which is really interesting, what we've assumed is that AI would kill search. But what we've seen is that AI actually increases the number of Google searches once they've researched it using AI. It's not eliminating the decision. It's actually introducing more information that the user often doesn't know how to process and has to generate out 3 to 6x more search queries to solve that same equation. It's giving them an answer, then they open a new tab and they research that a little bit more, and they open a new tab and research that a little bit more. And so what we're left with is a bunch of direct traffic based on this new user behavioral shift that we can't actually measure what the original query was. I'm sure at some point the industry will solve this, but there's no path forward that I've seen that solves this just yet. So the interesting part here is the clearer we can get with getting them to the right solution fastest is going to win. The more they have to wallow in mountains and mountains and mountains of data, the more they're going to be confused, the less they're going to buy. Eliminate risk from a client's decision. Help them understand that this is the right decision. And there's lots of ways that you do this. We call this payoff messaging in the lead marketing framework. We look at, first of all, when we look at what goes in your messaging to your website, we start with the DC3 model. This is part of the lead marketing framework brand positioning sprint. And we go, is it differentiated? Is it different than everybody else? Is it clear? Is it compelling? Are they going to get it? Is it customer centric? Is it about them and not about me? Right? And then we're going to take that framework and we're going to figure out what 3 to 5 things we need to say that actually matter, that help people evaluate and buy. And then we're going to figure out ways to prove it. And then we call that payoff messaging. Oftentimes I can't just say that we're the best. I need a customer to save that for us. I can't just say, hey, we're on time, because everybody else raises their hand and says, hey, we show up on time too. I need to be able to measure that. And how do I prove that with data? Hey, we measure when our team shows up at an appointment time. And 97.3% of the time we show up on time, right? We give you a service window of we're going to show up within an hour, not we're going to say we're going to show up between 9 and 5 p.m. So now you can figure out ways of paying that off that substantially makes you different. The thing that I would filter in here is this. We're losing in the marketing space with AI, we're losing that buyer journey. And so we have to really lean into how do we clarify that buyer's journey and how do we own that data set. So a good example of this. I think you should own your data. If you are going to invest in your website structure to get more visibility into AI, you should know what percentage of your traffic is shifting from traditional search and SEO to AI. How do you measure that? You can measure that. We've been doing this a lot lately where we've been setting up specific DNS access where we can look and build reporting off of crawler control. We can see ChatGPT crawled our website 4,000 times this month. So if I do a bunch of content investments that help answer client questions before they ask, that AI can just pull them in with the right answer as opposed to guessing at the answer, I want to show that AI has had crawled that page, that specific page for that query. We can borrow from other disciplines, right? People also ask from a SEO discipline. We can understand what our sales team is doing. We can put on chatbots onto our site and get voice of the customer process back into our website so that we know what questions people are struggling with, so we can pre-address that content. And the easiest answer to this is go ask your sales team. What questions did you get this week? And make an objective, right? We're going to make sure that our sales team can query and find the answers that customers are asking within 5 seconds or less on our own website. And if not, our marketing team is going to go create content and put that out there live for everybody to find in the next 30 days. We should have meaningful strategies around this that help accelerate that buyer process, and we can no longer hide all of that data behind a sales deck. I've seen so many organizations doing that. They think that they still have that power equation and they can keep all of that information hidden behind, and we'll just talk about it. When we get to the sales conversation, we'll listen to them, we'll talk through it, we can overcome their objections. That world has sailed. That doesn't exist anymore. The organizations that take that content, flip it open, have meaningful conversations around what a client should be thinking through or evaluating, is going to give that information to all of these LLMs, to all of this, whether it's ChatGPT or whoever, that's now going to have the ability to pull this and evaluate this data as opposed to just making it up. We're seeing that so often. Oftentimes what's happening is that AI is just making up answers. We know it's making up answers, but it's enough. If it's a complex buying decision, they're just looking at it and then they open up another browser and search again, search and search again. Don't get your website stuck in this no decision model. Hopefully this is helpful. We're offering a few really great resources that I think will help organizations. I think the investment into your website is more important now than ever. That is the foundation of what AI, LLMs are going to base their information gathering off of. And if you're not making that investment, if you're just going to AI to draft it and write it, a robot is feeding a robot. There's no clear positioning. They're going to filter out AI-generated content anyway. You're going to slip further and further back, right? There's no problem with using AI to draft and build out your content, but a human should look at it and say, is this right? And if it's right, there's some clear steps on what you should do next. At the very least, you should be thinking through, how do I strip out AI fingerprints out of my content strategy? And if you haven't thought through that yet, let's talk. There's some clear next steps to do on that end too. But I think, once again, this is a good place to rip open Band-Aids off of your own website and go, is this still serving us? What's the strategic framework for the next 12 months? What do we build? What do we need to talk about? How do we feed the right kind of content into our site so that the right people are finding themselves emotionally in what we're talking about? We're going to have a couple clear next steps for you. One of those is probably understanding the core KPIs that are associated with AI and what we should be measuring. Whether that's a cursory audit or a consultation, you can come talk to us and we'll talk through what do we see in your website, what next steps would we take. Or a defined website roadmap, which is a strategy document that says, here's exactly what you should be thinking about in building in the next 12 months. And building out, this is what's included in this next phase, and this is what's not included and included in future phases based off of a priority list. And so those are conversations that we set up. That's a paid engagement that 454 does. Oftentimes what happens in an RFP process, people are coming to us self-scoped. You've self-diagnosed your problem. It's the equivalent of going on WebMD and saying, I think I'm going to die. I have this rash. And so what we want to do is to go, maybe let's go validate that And here's what this looks like so that you can objectively have an external look at it and go, is that the right problem to solve? All right, we're looking forward to taking next steps with you and accelerating your growth and achieving really great things. Thanks for tuning into this version of the Lean Marketing Podcast.